There are monsters in this world who walk among us, and they blend in so perfectly that you'd live next door to them, work with them, or maybe be in line at a coffee shop behind them, and never truly know how close you are to real evil. Today, we take a look at one such individual and witness the end of the road for a cold, meticulous killer who remained elusive for years before the evil he perpetrated finally caught up to him. The beginning of the end started in the city of Anchorage, Alaska, a cold, snow-covered metropolitan city with large chunks of uninhabited land and enough room for monsters to prowl. On the evening of February 1st, 2012, 18-year-old Samantha Koenig was working at a coffee stand called Common Grounds. Samantha, by all accounts, was a pleasant and bubbly young woman. For now, she was happy as the shift was about to end because she was tired and just wanted to get home. But before she could lock up and leave, a customer showed up to the window of her stand and ordered a cup of coffee. Samantha chatted with the tall young man briefly and then started making his coffee. But when Samantha turned around to hand this coffee to her customer is when things took a turn. A security camera showed Samantha flinching and then throwing her hands up in the air as a person outside pointed a gun at her and commanded her to stay silent. He then told her to turn off the lights inside the coffee stand. Samantha complied. The man then jumped into the window, grabbed Samantha, and pressed the gun against her. The camera then catches Samantha walking outside with the man with his arm around her before they get into his car and exit the camera's view. Samantha never came home that night, which had her father and her boyfriend worried sick. But then her boyfriend received a message from Samantha saying she was just exhausted and needed to get away for a few days. This was extremely uncharacteristic of Samantha and aroused suspicion in those who knew and loved her. The next morning, Samantha's father went to the coffee stand. He found the door unlocked. The cash register at the stand was open, but it didn't seem like anybody had taken much out of it. And the most haunting part, Samantha's car was still in the parking lot. A missing persons report was filed instantly, and police descended upon Anchorage in huge numbers. Search teams combed through snowbanks, lakes, and frozen rivers. Detectives worked around the clock. The family held vigils and put up missing posters all around town. But there was radio silence. Days turned into weeks, and there was no clue as to where Samantha could be. But then something unusual happened. There was a text that came from Samantha's phone. Sadly, it wasn't Samantha texting to tell her father that she was okay. Instead, to her family's horror, it was somebody else telling them to go to a certain spot in a park. Samantha's father immediately contacted the police, and when they got there, they found a picture of Samantha holding that day's newspaper. The picture was eerie. Samantha looked in bad shape, and her eyes, they seemed lifeless. In kidnapping cases, this is what's known as a proof of life photo. Attached to it was a demand for ransom, $30,000 to be sent to Samantha's bank account. Upon learning this, Samantha's father found a glimmer of hope that his little girl was fine, and he scrambled to get the money together. But seeing as he wasn't a rich man, all he could conjure up was $5,000, and he sent it to Samantha's account. But they heard nothing after that. The police didn't have much to do while they waited, so they focused on the ransom photo. And the more they analyzed it, something horrific started to dawn on them. Samantha's eyes were open, and her hands held up the newspaper. But something felt off. Over the course of the next few weeks, transactions from Samantha's cards started popping up at different ATMs. But these weren't in Alaska, but thousands of miles away in Arizona, New Mexico, and then Texas. Since the trail crossed state limits, the FBI got involved. They mapped out the route, which indicated whoever was making the transactions was driving east along Interstate 10. They scoured through the security footage from the ATMs and found a tall man wearing different disguises, including hats, sunglasses, and even a fake beard. But that wasn't all they got on those tapes. They also saw a vehicle, a white Ford Focus, in all of those videos, suggesting that this was the man's car. A be on the lookout order was issued across all police departments along the route. Finally, on March 13, 2012 in Lufkin, Texas, a state trooper named Brian Henry noticed a white Ford Focus pulling out of a motel parking lot. Nothing unusual, except the car matched the FBI's alert. The trooper flipped on his lights. The driver pulled over without hesitation. The officer walked up to the window of his car and asked for his license and registration. The man appeared to be polite, calm, and cooperative. Nothing about him seemed dangerous, no criminal record, no history of violence. He smiled, made small talk, and waited patiently as the trooper checked his information. But then, the officer made a harrowing discovery. He noticed something in the passenger seat: a roll of cash, a black ski mask, and a gun. The trooper immediately called for backup. When agents searched the car, they found Samantha Koenig's debit card and her cell phone. In that instant, the man in front of them, a quiet carpenter from Alaska, became the prime suspect in one of the most disturbing abductions the FBI had ever seen. The man was identified as Israel Keyes of Anchorage, Alaska. When they told Anchorage investigators his name, there was silence. No one had ever heard of Israel Keyes. He wasn't on any watch list, he wasn't connected to any local crimes. He ran a construction business, paid his bills, and raised his daughter. He blended in perfectly. The FBI immediately took him into custody, and so began the interviews with Israel Keyes, which shocked the investigators, but not because of what he said, but how he said it. He was amused by his own evil and reveled in the details he disclosed to the investigators. He explained exactly what had happened to Samantha. The night he abducted her, he took her to his shed in his house and tied her up, then went inside the house to make sure his girlfriend and his 10-year-old daughter didn't wake up. That same night, he proceeded to assault and brutally murder the innocent 18-year-old victim. And brace yourself for this. After he perpetrated this monstrosity, he went upstairs, packed his bag and his daughter's, and left for a Caribbean cruise the next day. While he smiled for photos on this trip, Samantha laid lifeless in his shed, and her family riddled with the worst of pains. As with the ransom photo, it turns out that proof of life was anything but that. Keyes had propped Samantha up, sewed her eyes open, and put the paper in her hand to take the photo. After that, he dismembered Samantha's body and disposed of it in a nearby frozen lake, which he led the police to later. This, however, would not be the end of the horrors. The more he talked, the more chills he sent down the investigators' spines by confessing to multiple murders across states. The previous year, he had murdered a couple in Vermont after breaking into their home, kidnapping them, and then murdering them. He confessed to bank robberies in New York and Texas. Then, the investigators delved deeper into Israel Keyes and learned that he had been fascinated with the control he could exert over life and death itself. He had fantasized about these violent acts since a very young age and had planned meticulously for years on how to kill and how to pick his victims, making sure there was no pattern, no motive, and no connection, picking people in different states, and for this purpose, he had murder kits buried across various states which he could retrieve whenever he wanted. In December 2012, while awaiting trial, Israel Keyes killed himself in his cell, slashing his wrists and strangling himself. Beside his body was a suicide note, a rambling poem about murder, death, and darkness, and drawings of 11 skulls. Each skull, the FBI believes, represented a victim. Most of them have never been found. For Samantha's family, the answers came too late. But her case exposed the monster no one even knew existed, a man who lived among ordinary people as a carpenter, an army veteran, and a father, hid in plain sight and treated murder like a craft. Israel Keyes once told investigators, "I liked it, knowing it could be anyone, anywhere." And maybe that's the most terrifying part, because this was the kind of monster that doesn't hide under your bed. This was a monster who built them.